Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is Getting Unstuck, How to Change What If to What Could Be. It's a conversation with Erin Rocchio, Managing Partner of Evolution. I'm Mindy Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for Financial Advisors. At Diamond Consultants, our mission is to help advisors live their best business life. We want every elite advisor to find exactly the right place for their business and their clients to thrive, whether it's at a wirehouse, a regional, boutique, or independent firm. As the industry's leading recruiters and consultants, we've transitioned more than $250 billion in assets under management in the past decade, and each year, 25% of transitioning advisors who manage $1 billion or more are our clients. If you'd like to talk, please feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002. Are you a financial advisor who's curious about whether you're in the best place to serve clients, or if there might be a better way to optimize your business for the future? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a new book that serves as a self-guided journey, walking you through the key steps that Diamond Consultants takes with our advisor clients, whether considering change or not. Visit diamond-consultants.com/thebook to learn more. When I started writing the book, Should I Stay or Should I Go, one of the concepts that served as the foundation for it was the parable of the trapeze by Danon Parry. The story serves as an analogy for what we see many advisors going through at some point in their careers. That is, an emotional journey representing their struggle with the fear of the unknown. While they may be dissatisfied with the firm they work for, the fear of change can be all too consuming. So as the parable teaches, they hang on to the trapeze bar of their current life, and although they can see the other bar beckoning to them, they just can't reach out for it for the next one. Yet each and every day, advisors choose to reach out and grab hold of that next bar that swings before them, that beckons them, and ultimately transforms their business lives. How do they do it? Is it courage? Is it sheer will? Is it knowledge or something else entirely? It's a question I posed of my coach, Erin Rocchio. Erin has a unique knack for helping people like you and me dig deep and break free of the inertia that prevents us from grabbing that next bar. So she joins me on this episode to help identify the strategies that she employs with her clients to create transformational change in our business lives, from fostering an open mind to navigating out of your comfort zone and overcoming the fear that can leave us paralyzed and stuck in a place that we're ultimately not happy with. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get to it. Erin, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited about this episode.
Thanks so much for having me, Mindy. I'm thrilled.
Pleasure. All right. So I want to start off with probably the most mundane of questions, but I want to give people an idea of who you are. So tell us a little bit about yourself, the firm you work for, and how you got there.
Absolutely. I am a managing partner at Evolution. We're a coaching and consulting firm based out of Los Angeles, but now global, with offices out of London and Europe. And we really focus on high growth companies, primarily in tech and also healthcare, but we're industry agnostic. So we serve leaders that are going through intense growing pains, helping them maintain and build and nurture sustainable, healthy culture. I came to this world almost 20 years ago, actually starting through my own family business, followed my dad into the world of executive coaching, helped him build his firm. Went out on my own in 2016 with a real desire to understand and help solve workplace burnout, and then joined Evolution in 2019 as a partner. And my background's in education. I have a master's in positive organization development, certified coach. So I'm happy we're talking about this today.
Right in your wheelhouse. I will share with the audience that Erin is my coach, my executive coach. And when in reading her bio, which appears on her website, she talks about for the intersection, the sweet spot between business results and personal meaning. And if anybody who knows me, clients or otherwise, I'm all about personal meaning. Like business results mean nothing to me if it doesn't align with my values and goals and really doing the right thing. So that spoke to me. For me, I reached out to a coach because I think that every good leader should always have a coach in their corner. And that's not meant to be an advertisement for Erin or any other coach, but it is to say that I think that it's very easy for thinking to become insular. And it's wonderful to have a smart person who gets you. And one thing that Erin said to me, I asked her on the first call, I think I can do this myself. I'm very self-aware. I'm not sure I need a coach. And her answer to me was not in any way to sell me, but essentially, you'll probably get further faster with me than without me. And I love that answer too. But I wanted to ask you a question, Erin. So I think that a lot of people reach out to coaches when they are stuck. In your view, or from where you sit, what are the most common places where even the best leaders and business people get stuck?
Thanks, Mindy. It's great to hear our relationship evolution as well from your lens. So there's a few places that I tend to interact with leaders at the executive level or just below. One of the places people get stuck is trying to elevate, like they've gotten a new role and they're still trying to do the things that they did at a previous level, or let's say they went from VP to an executive level role. They're still trying to show up and operate in the way that they did before. They haven't shifted both how they're spending their time, but also how they're holding and providing value. And so a lot of times as we're elevating into our careers, we might get praised and validated and we find impact by demonstrating certain behaviors or having certain results that we're driving. Things shift dramatically when you get to the executive level, and it takes a bit of a transformation around how someone identifies, how they feel valued, and how they're showing up and leading from a higher perspective or elevation. And so that's one of the big areas that coaches can make a difference, is helping someone raise their perspective so they can see more broadly and more strategically instead of getting stuck in the doing and the day-to-day and the tactics.
That's a wonderful jumping off point because, as I've shared with you, our audience is made up of an awful lot of financial advisors that have spent a lifetime practicing within big firms. They worked at Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or UBS or whatever it is. And in this sort of new world order, it's not uncommon for financial advisors to go independent. We call them the breakaways. And so what you've got is this new generation of people that were excellent advisors, great at managing money, great at nurturing relationships, great at building their personal asset base, but never really taught to be a business owner or a business leader. I think your perspective is the right one because just because you're a great advisor doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be a great leader. That brings us really to the theme or thesis of our episode today. So in writing my newly released book, Should I Stay or Should I Go? The first chapter in the book is about the parable of the trapeze. The parable of the trapeze is my favorite analogy. When I read it, I thought my mind was going to explode. It spoke to me so much. And it speaks to me so much, just given the lens through which I see the world. I coach financial advisors that often get stuck in inertia. So it is the parable of the trapeze is the best analogy for what advisors go through at some point in their careers. And to me, it's a parable about making the leap from comfort to growth and letting go of comfort zones. So let me just take 1 second. And for anybody who hasn't read it, I highly encourage you to do so. Maybe that's a shameless pitch for the book as well, because I talk about it there with respect to being a financial advisor. But essentially, the parable of the trapeze talks about somebody who is holding on to a trapeze bar. It's comfortable or comfortably uncomfortable, but it's certainly familiar. And all of a sudden, as they're merrily swinging along, as if for the first time, they see another trapeze bar in front of them, like they never noticed it before. And now suddenly there's the dilemma. Do I reach for that unfamiliar trapeze bar for whatever it could mean? Or do I stay holding on to the one that's familiar? So I would ask you as a coach, what does it mean to you?
I agree that I love this metaphor a lot. It symbolizes to me the felt and lived experience of someone facing change or considering change or even going through it. Here's how I relate to it. For me, jumping from one bar to the next requires a few things. One, it requires courage. Any sort of change requires you embracing and acknowledging you're afraid and being willing to do the hard thing in service to something greater. So one, there's a courage factor, but two, there's this feeling of death almost, like I'm going to die if I don't catch the second bar. And so there's an inherent risk that we have to be willing to sit with and hold. There's often a sense of loss because we might like the previous bar. That one was known and comfortable and fun and cozy, but there might be something more compelling in the future. So while change is terrifying, as I imagine real trapeze arts are, I have not done it, but I can imagine. While it's terrifying and you have that feeling, that momentary feeling of falling or death, it's also absolutely thrilling and required for someone to break through and find something of more meaning, in my experience. So it's worth it, but it does require a ton of internal attributes that people have to tap into that they might not have previously.
I love what you said, and I couldn't agree with you more. That feeling of death. And it's funny because I think about the feeling of death in two ways with respect to what we're talking about. On the one hand, you feel like you'll die inside if you stay stuck and you don't reach for something better as long as you know it's possible.
Yes.
But it also feels like death, terrifyingly scary to let go of something, even if you know it's uncomfortable or it's wrong, to let go of some place where you or something where you have been comfortable for X number of years, perhaps the whole of your career. It is terrifying, akin to a death to let go. It's funny, I have had that experience multiple times in my life. And I realize I am a person, I embrace change. My family thinks I'm weird because I actually really like it, that it jazzes me. It's not to say that it doesn't scare me, but I'm jazzed by letting go of one bar and hopping to something new. But I do think that it's somewhat unusual and I don't feel scared by it. I feel energized by it. And for me, the feeling of death, I think a lot of times would come up in not doing something that I thought could take me to a better place.
Right. I've had that same experience multiple times, both personally and professionally, where here's what I'd say. There's two things that would, in this metaphor, if we play it out, that would have a new bar arise out of thin air. One is the current situation is so painful. You really feel like if I stay, there will be some form of death or loss of identity or loss of values or something, in which case that new bar looks really great, right? You're like, that's way better than what I've got now. In other cases, I feel like the new bar, to extend this metaphor out, right, is because the vision of what's possible is so compelling. Like, oh my God, if I start my own practice, if I go out on my own, the thrill of independence and the freedom and flexibility that will give me is so compelling for me and my family or my life. And it's such a better reflection of what I care about in terms of core values. That's going to have me want to go there. And the thing that we have to, I think, be mindful of is there are some of us, Mindy, you and I are similar in this way, that we're wired, I think, naturally to embrace change. We have a growth mindset. We see change and opportunity as a way to better ourselves or better our lives. Not everybody is wired that way fundamentally. And so we are going to have the different kinds of people are going to have different sets of experiences when facing these thresholds. For some of them, and I know people very close to me for whom security and status is really essential to their feeling good about their life. And so that might have them make certain choices in one way or make a change like this even more difficult. For others, it might be my values are so essential to me and growth and evolution, lowercase e, is really critical to my own identity. That would have me take the leap more easily. So I think a lot of this comes down to one of the strengths that you have, which is self-awareness and the ability to self-reflect and say, how bad is the pain here? How great is my vision? And what are the values that are underlying all of this upon which I can make a thoughtful choice?
Yeah. So we are so aligned because, in my words, when I counsel a financial advisor, what I say to them is, you won't change simply because you are in pain. You will change because there is a confluence between some amount of pain, something that's pushing you out the door, but it has to be married by a certain excitement or vision, as you said, of what's possible. And I think that number one, I would answer the question I just asked you, that if you're only moving out of pain, I think you'll find it very difficult to let go because it will be scarier. I think what makes it easier to let go of the familiar is that you're excited about where you're going.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to say to you, which really spoke to me, is that you say many, it's not that they don't have a growth mindset, but change would feel scarier. And I don't think that's a pejorative or necessarily an indictment saying that somebody is less entrepreneurial or less growth minded than someone who is. But my question for you is this: can someone who, as you say, values security and status, so values the security of the status quo and the status of being a senior leader or a well-known entity with the same firm for a long time, how does that person who isn't naturally wired either with a growth mindset or wired to embrace change, can they ever get to a place where it feels less scary and make the change?
That's a really great question. And I just want to underscore what you said about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Some of us love security, some of us love change and newness. There's no judgment on either side of those spectrums. I think the most important thing is just to acknowledge and be honest about who and how we are, right? How we fundamentally are wired. I don't know that, and this is a little bit of my bias here, Mindy, but I don't know that kind of entrepreneurial life is for everybody. I really don't. I've seen people struggle with it. If they need more known and they struggle with ambiguity, it might be better and wiser for them to stay where there's more structure and there's more support and things are less uncertain. Others of us look at uncertainty and see it as potential and the opportunity to shape things. And we're wired that way to thrive in that environment. And for those folks, you and I happen to fall in that camp. But for those of us that are resonating with that, then I would say entrepreneurial life is probably better suited for us. Like I would struggle in a large, highly structured, highly organized organization, even if it gave me status and money. Like it actually would not work for me.
You would feel that death you're talking
I
about,
would.
staying in the wrong place. But, I'll point something out. In the world in which we work, the wealth management space, the people that I counsel, there is a less big move that they can make. So someone could be holding on to a trapeze bar, acknowledging the fact that there are pain points to whatever degree they are painful, and beginning to get curious about what else is out there. Almost everyone wants to understand what independence is, because there's no doubt that independence, being an entrepreneur, is what allows someone to have the greatest agency and control and flexibility, and ultimately have 100% control and monetize the business at day's end for the greatest amount. But as you point out, and you are 1,000% right, not everyone wants to be or should be an entrepreneur. But the less big change that someone can make, if they are uncomfortable enough, is instead of making the leap to independence, make the leap to another traditional firm, meaning stay as an employee, but perhaps you go from Merrill Lynch to Raymond James, meaning more of a smaller firm or a boutique firm, if you will. What do you think about that?
I love it. I mean, I'm a moderate in many ways. I think that when we're talking about taking leaps, what would support someone going from something very known and certain to something completely new with lots of potential, but lots of risk? I love the middle ground approach because it does help us ease our way in to something and de-risk it. Now, what I say to everybody going through change, whether it's an individual or an entire company on the brink of some sort of operational or cultural change, it's really important for us to recognize and preserve the parts of the past that feel essential and safe. Because then our brains can settle in and go, well, as long as I've got this sacred thing protected, now I'm more open and flexible to this other parts that are more ambiguous, right? So if one of the things they loved at a really large firm was the network and the ability to, I'm making this up, right? But like the connections and the influence they could have with a larger platform, cool. How could we replicate and preserve that even if they go to a smaller house? How do we double down on their network building and their relationship building, even as the environment around them shifts a little bit? Right. So that's a great question, I think, for people to think about. What feels sacred? What needs to be preserved that would allow me to feel a little more comfortable taking that leap to the next trapeze bar?
Yeah, I think that's really valid. I love that. I mentioned earlier that I can think of several big examples, big and small, in my personal and professional life where this parable of the trapeze is relevant. But I'm thinking right this minute of when I was probably, I'm going to say 27 years old. And I graduated college. I have an accounting degree. I went to work for a big 8 public accounting firm for a couple of years. I hated it. I hated every single thing about it. If you know anything about me, I felt trapped in numbers. It was ill-suited for me in 1,000 ways. But I had gone to school for accounting, and being an accountant was really important to my father. I'm not even sure why to this day, but it really was. And when I went to an accounting search firm at 25 years old to look for another accounting position, and they offered me a job to be a recruiter. So at first, that became the trapeze bar that I had never seen before. It never occurred to me that there was a world beyond accounting. I just assumed I'd be stuck in a career that I either hated or hoped to find something maybe I'd hate just a little bit less, but never expected to find something that I loved. Once I saw that bar, it became hard to ignore. And I tried to ignore it, by the way, for a period of time because I thought my father would think I was nuts. They were offering me a draw and I was making good money as an accountant. And for a lot of reasons, it just felt like I was going to disappoint the universe, like I was doing something wrong. I tried for the better part of a year to ignore that new bar until one day I couldn't. Put some of your magic. Erin has a way, I'm going to say this, of taking a lot of words and putting into really smart few. That's something she's really helped me with. So what are your smart, magical words for what I just described?
Oh man, let's see. I will say I've also lived through those moments, Mindy, and here's how I feel about it. There's like a call from inside of you. I don't know where it comes from, whether it's your higher self, whether it's some spiritual thing, or just a deeper, more pure part of you that says, this is not it. There has to be something else. I know what it's like to ignore that voice and that calling. And it is more painful in my experience to grip the current trapeze bar that you're holding on to. Once you've heard that call, it is so much more painful than actually letting go and jumping to something new, because it's like you can't unsee it. It's like you've taken the red pill in the Matrix. It's like, okay, there's something here. The status quo is no longer aligned, and it's painful to consider leaving, but it might be way more painful to stay. So for me, it feels like a calling, and we have to pay attention.
That's exactly right. What do you do with that? So for a year, in my case, I lived with, I don't even know that it's that the calling became louder. At the beginning of that year, it was like, oh, what do you know? Nice to be wanted. Didn't really give it a second thought. A week or two later, it became maybe a little louder. A month or two later, it became louder than that until it literally became an obsession and it was all I could think about and I couldn't not think about it. It did become a calling. But what do you do in the meantime? How do you get from here to there? How do you get from that place of, oh, there's a new bar, what do you know, to really actually knowing it's the right time to make a move? What do you do in between?
Yeah, awesome question. Like, what's the path? So the very first thing I think is important is for everyone to pay attention to that call or that inner voice, that inner wisdom, as I call it, and really start to listen to it, understand it, even if it's terrifying what it's telling you, to really get to know what it wants for you and why. So the first thing is, what is it saying? Second is, why is it saying that? And this, you're going to hear me talk about core values ad nauseum. Mindy, you and I talk about it every day. We talk. But understanding, is the calling about something external and status oriented, or is it coming from a deeper, more truer place that says, this is not my path. My path is elsewhere. However terrifying, my growth lies over here. So listen to it, understand it. And then I think the next thing is to actually vocalize it with people that you trust. And you said at the top of this, everybody should have a coach. I also believe that, not just because I'm in the profession. I have my own coaches. Everybody needs, in my opinion, a council of advisors that see you in your bigness, in your fullness, your whole self. They know your values, they know who you are, and they can hold this lens for you of you at your best. And they're listening for you in a certain way. So when you go to them and say, hey, I've been having this really annoying, obsessive thought that I need to be doing something else, help me understand it. And what do you see? That you've got a handful of other data points and perspectives that you can then bring into your own reflection so that you can get to what's true for you. For me, that includes going to my best friends, going to my family. I have multiple coaches, multiple colleagues that are my wisdom advisors, and they can help reflect back to me what's most important here for me in this moment and why would I make a move. And then you can get really practical and figure out how to do that in a smart way. But I take an inside out approach, but it's also, you do need to get other perspectives and from people that really know you and love you and can hold you in your bigness.
Yep. So I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more. But I'll make the point that change, letting go of that trapeze bar and grabbing for the other one, even if you've got an obsessive, annoying voice in your head that's saying, look what's possible, or a calling, for some, whether it be because they're too late in their career, or because they don't have the risk appetite, or because they don't have a strong enough team to support them, who knows what it is. But there are times where you may hear that voice. I think I agree with you 1,000%. You must honor that voice. In other words, you shouldn't ignore it. You can't just make pretend it's not there or try to unsee it, because the more you try to unsee it or stuff it or ignore it, the louder it gets. I think we know that for sure. But I will say that as long as you honor it, acknowledge it, explore it, meaning get educated about what it could mean, and you make an intentional choice, I think it's okay in some cases for someone to come to the conclusion, yeah, there is another bar. Yeah, there are aspects of it that are interesting. Yes, it would be nice, but this is not the right time to move, or it's not right for me to make a change, or it was interesting, glad I explored it, but it's not for me. So I think what I'm saying is, as long as you've acknowledged it, then you're empowered to make an intentional choice.
100%. I think it's really critical to you stay or go or make any choice in your life that you're doing so thoughtfully, that you've reflected on it, and that it is aligned with your values, and it is by choice. You're not stuck ever. One of the things I just want to go back to, you just said about ignoring the calling. That is one of the greatest sources of suffering I've seen in people. Like in my life, I'll say, when I tried mightily for years to ignore that calling, man, did I suffer intent. And I am deeply committed. This is why I do the work I do. I want to reduce and eliminate suffering that's self-imposed. Life is hard enough. There's so much self-imposed suffering and pain that if we understand it and work with it and make intentional choices, it doesn't have to be that bad, and can actually be incredible, and we can flourish and thrive. So if you want to stay at a place, fabulous. Just understand why you're doing it, because you've done the reflection, you've had the conversations, you've explored your options, and you're making a choice in either direction that suits you well.
Right. And you're right. So in other words, I work with plenty of people that explore their options, go out and do some due diligence because they think that making a change is what they want to do, or because they watched a respective colleague move and say, "Oh, if Bob did it, maybe I should do it too." But at the end of the day, after they've done that due diligence or they've gone out and kicked some tires, they've come back and decided the status quo isn't so bad. It serves me well enough. And so I think that getting educated. So step one is hearing the calling, honoring the voice in your head that says something's not quite right, not perfect, not good enough, whatever the voice says, going out and exploring what that voice means, whether it be with a therapist, a coach, a best friend, a family member, a spouse, whatever it is, or going out and talking to another firm to actually figure out if there's something better. Very often people come back and say, you know what, where I am is more than good enough. And I am recommitting from a position of greater strength. To me, that's the key in what we're saying here. You don't necessarily have to change just because you're unhappy or because you may be curious. Going out and actually honoring that voice and exploring may actually help you to recommit with acceptance and full throatedness to the status quo.
Absolutely. And it might make you clear along the way of what you have influence over in your current position to make things more aligned for you.
That's right.
So you might go, it's easy to go, oh, shiny object, let me go jump firms. When in fact, really what you want is, for example, more connection and influence with your boss. Okay, cool. Well, that's a different solve than jumping firms. And if you're clear about that, because you've gone through that process you just outlined so beautifully, that's the middle ground approach, a wise approach, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. All right. So I want to ask you a question that's really near and dear to my heart. I spend a whole lot of my counsel with the advisors I'm privileged enough to work with talking about the concept of more than good enough, better enough, or more than good enough. And what I mean by that is that most quality financial advisors make a lot of money. They're successful. They have clients that they like. The clients trust them. It's good enough. It allows them, it's a career that no matter where they practice, they have at least a modicum of agency over their life so that they have no problem going out and coaching their daughter's softball team or taking their child to a tutor or something of whatever it may be. And many of them, even if they're not independent, think of themselves in a certain entrepreneurial way. They're running their own business, even if they work for a big firm. And so for the vast majority of advisors that I talk with, they live in a place for a really long time of good enough. And good enough is really good enough. In other words, people may say good enough, but it's really mediocre. I think for the people I'm referring to, good enough really is good enough. It's much more than mediocre. But the people that wind up changing, what I say to them is that the benchmark or criteria for a move to be worthwhile, it's a hassle to move, it's disruptive, it's scary, it's all these things we're talking about. In order for it to be worthwhile, it needs to be more than better enough or more than marginally needle moving. So I'm wondering from your perspective, the fact that the concept of good enough comes up a lot in the conversations we have with advisors. What do you think of the phrase and what do you do with that information? It's good enough. I'm not giving it rave reviews. It's good enough.
Amazing question. And there's so many layers to this because we could go all the way down to the interpersonal. The personal is like a very deeply seated need that we all have as human beings to be enough, right? And be worthy. So there's that, which I won't really go into today. I want to go more to how this plays out in the workplace. And when someone looks out, as you said, at their environment and go, oh yeah, this is good enough. The language that I use and the frame that I hold, Mindy, is that of sufficiency. What is sufficient? It is very easy if especially we feel that inner angst, like nothing's ever good enough, to that will play out in our work environment and the choices we make around our work lives to strive and constantly seek more. If someone's at the point in their career where they're actually satisfied and good enough is accurate, and is, to me, that's a reflection of sufficiency. I have enough of what I need to feel safe and secure and at peace with myself. And that's my goal with all my clients. That's my goal for myself in life, is really exploring what is enough. What is enough money? What is enough? What are enough projects? What are enough clients? Is enough time away from my kids? What's enough time with my kids? What is sufficient for me to feel like I am staying true to what's most important to me, my values? I am spending quality time in those spaces and with those people that are most important to me. And what's my range? Like, we all need some flexibility with this, right? So like, what's my ideal? Maybe, gosh, yeah, I'd love to make millions more dollars. That would be really great. Do I need that? Not really. I'm really great right now. Okay. So sufficiency is the key for me. Knowing what our minimum requirements are. This is how we get out of mediocrity. What are my minimum requirements in any situation to feel safe, secure, and aligned with my values? Once we know our minimum, we can envision the ideal. We've got a range or a window within that answers this question of enoughness or sufficiency.
I like that. And my mind is going because it brings up a couple of things for me. When I hear the word satisfied, to my brain, that feels not enough to me. And maybe it's because I have this change mindset or growth mindset. Maybe I'm wired. Maybe I really am a weirdo, like my kids say, or I really am unusual. But I will tell you a story that many years ago, we had two financial advisors that we were young married and they were young and we liked them very much. And we went to do a quarterly or annual review with them of our investments. And they said something like, "Oh, you're doing just fine. You're going to walk across the finish line at the end of the day." That was a kiss of death. I heard walk across the finish line and said, this guy does not know me at all. I've never walked across anything in my life. That is not nearly enough. No, thank you. And we changed financial advisors, best move we ever made. But I share that story because when I hear, yes, satisfied to me has the ring of sort of minimally acceptable. And as you say, you identify your minimum requirements. So what if, though, you are satisfied, it meets your minimum requirements, but what if you know there's something, it could be better? And remember, as you answer this, these financial advisors we're speaking to, Erin, are people that manage other people's money. Like if they make a move, it's not just about what's better for themselves, it's about what could be better for their clients. So that notion of just sufficiency or minimum requirements to me seems lackluster. Am I not thinking about it the right way?
No, I completely understand your perspective. I think that you and I are wired similarly in this way, which is we're always looking for better, best. And this notion of sufficiency or enoughness actually goes directly against that, because the striving for what's better, it's almost like an insatiable hunger. Sometimes it feels like you cannot fulfill it, right? Mm-hmm. So I look at this from a balanced perspective. We don't ever want to be complacent. Putting you and I in a room, I can't believe someone said that. Well, you'll walk across the finish line. I want to be running across the darn finish line doing cartwheels. Like, come on, that's not why I'm here to live. I want to optimize my life. Like, I came here with purpose and I want to fulfill that and have a great, big, amazing life. And I know many of your listeners and you are like that too. So I would never, ever, and I don't even hold this definition in that way, think that complacency is the goal. The goal is knowing what that minimum is that says, I will be okay. And I still want to reach and strive and envision a new future and be creative and generate new possibilities for me and my clients and strive. I think that energy, that creative energy, is absolutely vital to us feeling alive and purposeful as human beings. So it's holding both and finding, we each have our own way of doing that.
Well, I think that's the key is that, okay, so for me, once I see a new bar, I could have predicted, because I know me now very well. I was a young 27, 28-year-old when I first saw that bar calling me to become a recruiter. And I now know that when something speaks to me in a whisper, it's not going to be long before it starts to be a drumbeat. But many people don't experience that. And I think you really hit it on the head, that it's an inside game. What's good enough for you may not be good enough for me, and vice versa. And that's what makes a horse race. Nothing wrong with that. What about, from your perspective, strategies for fostering a mindset that embraces change if you don't have it naturally, and a mindset that really sees change as exciting, as pivotal, as potentially transformational, instead of overwhelming or paralyzing?
Yeah. I'd say one of the kind of resources on this is called Growth Mindset by Carol Dweck, and she's done a ton of research around it. Really fabulous body of work to understand why and how some of us, and again, we can be pre-wired this way, but also our environment as we were growing up and as we got educated had us, and we all have some of this, had us develop around fear and what she calls a fixed mindset that says, I can't explore because then something bad will happen, or I can't fail, or I can't make a mistake. So therefore, I'm going to be risk averse and I'm going to go and do what's safe and expected. It's not like I permanently have a growth mindset in all domains of my life. There are pockets for all of us where we have growth versus fixed. And so I think that's a great first place for people to explore, is to understand what aspects of my life do I feel more anchored in fear or safety? What aspects of my life do I feel more energized by creative and generative potential? And I feel like risk means nothing to me because I want to do everything and create everything. So that's a first place that I would look. And then the second is I would get really clear. And I liked how you said this is inside work. If you're not already clear about your values, and what I mean by that are the attributes of your life and who you want to be that you genuinely prize and value, they give you meaning and purpose. If you have not yet done that exploration with yourself or with a coach or a therapist, that is another really important place to start, because then it can help us get clear, like, what are those areas where I want to be bolder, be more courageous, because I know my value is getting honored. And I think those are two really great places to begin.
I love it. I think that's great advice. I'm going to ask you another sort of action question. So, to me, the most powerful message in the parable of the trapeze is looking at the space between the bars, the most terrifying space. That year for me between holding on to the bar and being somewhat miserable, and all of a sudden seeing a new bar, and that year that it took me to actually get the courage, hear the voice loud enough, the calling loud enough, and the courage to make a move. But that white space can be excruciating. And those moments of uncertainty, the what ifs, as I call them, how would you counsel someone considering change to navigate that space and even get to embrace that space instead of being so put off or overwhelmed or terrified by it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to give you my deeper coachy type of response, because this is such a big question. Every single person that I work with and encounter in life, to me, this is a lifelong deep practice around learning how to sit with discomfort and with ambiguity and uncertainty. Human beings are not wired for that. We are wired to survive. And that means that we mitigate risk. Ambiguity and uncertainty and holding these what ifs are risky. So we're going against our instinct, and we have to build the physical capacity, the emotional capacity to hold what if as like what could be, right? Not what if I die. It's like, oh my God, what could I create if I really let myself imagine, or if I really gave myself the freedom and agency to build something on my own. And this is going to sound a little weird because I'm a weirdo too, but this is not just an intellectual exercise. A lot of people try to embrace or face change from their heads and think if they just rationalize it, it'll somehow make it easier. That's only one component. That's the first component. But there is something emotional and physical, learning to literally sit with discomfort and uncertainty in your body of not knowing and training yourself, your whole system, to know that it's safe and secure and can handle that white space between what was and what will be. That is literally the practice of our lifetime. Every single leader I work with has to build that muscle, every single one of them, myself included. So the ways that we do that include mindfulness practice. They include what we call somatic practice, which is building that capacity in your body. They include relational practice, learning to hold and build safe relationship where you can explore some of this. But it's doing work with to be honest, our nervous system and our brain to say, I can sit in this white space for longer to allow what really wants to happen without short-circuiting it because I'm afraid.
I'm sitting here throughout this episode telling you 100 times how I embrace change and I love change and I have a growth mindset, go me. But here's my truth. No one on this planet hates ambiguity and uncertainty more than me. They terrify me. I am so uncomfortable with them. And I just learned something wonderful that I am going to use, changing what if to what could be or what could I create or what's possible. I love that.
Awesome. For some of us, and again, I'm very similar to you. I don't love ambiguity because I like to be in control and shape my future.
Yeah.
Right? I want to have control over my destiny. That helps me feel safe. So this is a practice I have to do too, right? Is how do we let what wants to emerge? So it's taking more of like an artist lens, like Picasso, like what's coming, what wants to get made here?
Well, I think you said something that's really interesting. Like we're not wired to embrace ambiguity or uncertainty. We're wired to embrace control and certainty and knowing just what's going to happen next. And so I think a lot of times we conflate fear of the unknown or what we can't see with something terrible happening. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah. And I just want to like acknowledge the world that we live in today with tech and kind of the media environment and just the global nature of our lives. We are not wired from a physiological perspective to handle this much ambiguity and uncertainty. So it is hard. So when I said at the top, like life is hard enough as it is, because our system is inputting and taking in so much data constantly, right? Like I look at my phone all day and I'm like bombarded by information. That's too much anxiety and uncertainty and ambiguity in general for us to hold. And so then you throw in something like a major life change. And it's easy for people to feel bad about themselves. Like, oh, I should be bolder and I should be more courageous and be less afraid. I want to insert a moment of compassion for us as human beings living in this modern age. It is hard. It is hard. And being afraid of change, even considering it, is absolutely normal. We all go through it. And there are tools and there are structures to help you. But, this is a lot.
I appreciate that because I think that you're absolutely right. And even for someone who might love change, change is hard. I'm really glad you said that because it's important that we point out that even to someone who likes change is hard, for sure. I thought this episode was phenomenal. I learned a ton. I loved everything about it. I want to ask you one final question. So, how would you help someone who's in the process of determining their readiness for change? The book I just wrote is called Should I Stay or Should I Go? And while it was not at all written as a sales pitch to get somebody to change, it's a way of helping someone to assess everything we've talked about.
Yeah.
Am I in enough pain? Is there a possibility that it could be greater? All that sort of stuff. How would you help someone to really determine whether change is best or staying put is best?
Yeah. Well, we think about it similarly. And in this case, I actually like to get objective and do some work around, I guess it's objective and also internally reflective. So I've been talking about core values a lot, understanding what's important to you. That's a central element to this process. The other thing we haven't talked about yet, but I feel is absolutely vital, is getting clear on what your needs are. So in the realm of sufficiency, like what are your actual needs around finances, around time away from work, around the work environment you might be stepping into? Or do you need a more relational environment? Do you need a more distant or transactional environment? Understanding who you are and what your needs are, as well as what you value, then can have you look at what I call like the pain points, right? What are all the things that are aggravating me about my current state? And then what's the vision for what could be? Those four components to me are part of they make up the pie, so to speak, that help us get clear on what our move is. And I think it's important that someone first do that self-reflection objectively, like be really honest with yourself, and then get feedback from other people, right? Get feedback from someone like you, get feedback from, as I said, your kind of wisdom team to say, am I thinking about this in the right way? And then from there, that we've got to honor and trust our inner wisdom at the end of the day. So to me, that's where I want people to anchor in.
We are so aligned in that because I may use different words when I counsel folks, but I say the exact same thing. Like, first of all, you'll just know if you take all the right steps. One is you ask yourself the right questions and you really do the inside work to understand what's important to you. Like, okay, I'm in pain, but how much pain? And how essential is it to me to repair that pain or to make a change? And okay, so I've seen something that's better, but is it better enough? And how much value will it add? And will it feel like a death to me if I don't do it, et cetera? Once you get clear on all that other stuff and you marry that with the right facts, meaning the right information, you're looking at it the right way by, I agree with you, talking to a knowledgeable third party who can marry what's important to you with the realities of the world or what's available, you will know. And I think that's really the message here is a lot about paying attention to your inner voice.
Very well said. I'm so eager to finish your book.
Yay.
Yay. Thanks for having me, Mindy. This was such a treat.
Yeah, it was wonderful, Erin. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.